When glamorous city girl Rachel breaks down on a dusty rural road, she's rescued by Noah, a quiet, rugged farmer with no interest in her designer heels or high-maintenance attitude. But as days turn into weeks, what begins as a clash of two worlds becomes a heartwarming journey of transformation, love, and choosing purpose over privilege. Rachel Lawson gritted her teeth as steam poured from the hood of her luxury convertible. The sun beat down on her from above, and her phone had just lost its last bar of signal. Her designer sunglasses couldn't shield her from the frustration of being stuck in the middle of nowhere. She kicked the tire, instantly regretting it as her heel wobbled on the uneven gravel. The only sound around her was the buzz of insects and the distant hum of what seemed like farm equipment. Then, through the shimmer of heat on the road, a dusty tractor creaked into view. At the wheel was a man who looked like he'd walked straight out of a country novel. Noah Carter was tanned from years in the sun, with a square jaw dusted in stubble and brown hair tucked beneath a fraying cap. He eyed her cautiously as he slowed down, clearly surprised by the sight of a woman in red heels stranded on a country road. She crossed her arms, half defiant, half relieved. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice calm but guarded. Rachel didn't answer right away. Help from a stranger in overalls wasn't what she'd planned, but she didn't have much choice. Rachel hesitated, her pride battling her reality. She wasn't used to accepting help, especially not from strangers in tractors. "I'm fine," she lied, even as the heat made her dizzy. Noah gave her a long look, clearly unconvinced. "Suit yourself," he said, shifting gears to leave. But just as the tractor rolled forward, Rachel's voice cracked through the still air. "Wait." She hated the way it sounded, desperate. But she was stranded, overheated, and her designer sandals were doing nothing for her. Noah stopped and climbed down, nodding silently. Without another word, he opened the passenger door of his beat-up truck parked further down the road. Rachel eyed it with distaste. It looked like it hadn't seen a car wash in a decade. Still, she climbed in, clutching her handbag like armor. As they drove, the air smelled of hay and dust. Rachel's sharp perfume clashed with the earthy scent of the cabin. "You from around here?" she asked, trying to make polite conversation. "Born and raised," Noah replied curtly. The silence that followed was thick. Rachel turned to look out the window, fidgeting with her phone. No bars, no service, no plan. She was utterly out of her element, and she knew it. Noah's farmhouse sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by golden fields and a few scattered trees. It wasn't large or modern, but it had a quiet charm to it. Aged wood, flower pots, and a crooked weather vane spinning in the wind. Rachel stepped out of the truck cautiously, heels sinking into the gravel. Inside, the air smelled of something warm. Bread, maybe. A woman with curly auburn hair and flour on her apron greeted her at the door. "Lily," she said, offering a hand. "Noah's sister, you're welcome to join us for dinner." Rachel smiled politely, trying not to seem offended by the simple surroundings. Her stomach growled despite herself. Dinner was cornbread, beans, and roasted chicken. Rachel, used to truffle risottos and imported wines, hesitated. But hunger won out. She took small bites at first, then bigger ones. To her surprise, it was good, comforting even. The conversation around the table was light, mostly between Noah and Lily. Rachel felt out of place but listened quietly, curious. There was laughter, there was no judgment. For the first time in a long time, Rachel wasn't being watched or measured. She was simply there, and it was strangely soothing. Rachel was jolted awake by the sound of a rooster crowing. She sat up in bed, an unfamiliar, lumpy mattress in an attic room filled with sunlight. The air was cooler here, fresher but unfamiliar. Her silk blouse was wrinkled and her makeup had smudged into raccoon eyes. She groaned and stumbled toward the small mirror on the wall, horrified by the reflection. Downstairs, the farmhouse was already buzzing with life. She peered out the window and saw Noah outside, chopping wood shirtless, sweat glistening on his back. His movements were rhythmic, purposeful. Rachel found herself watching longer than she meant to, then looked away with a flush. After managing to find a brush and tie her hair up, she tiptoed downstairs. Noah greeted her with a simple nod. "Coffee," he offered. She took it gratefully. It was strong black, not her usual almond milk latte, but somehow perfect. When she asked if she could help with anything, Noah shrugged. "Try not to fall over," he joked, handing her a bucket to carry to the henhouse. She laughed, taking it with mock pride. 2 steps later, she tripped on a root. Noah caught her elbow, steadying her. "Told you," he said with a grin. And for once, Rachel laughed too. The clouds gathered suddenly, the sky shifting from soft blue to dark gray in minutes. Noah frowned as he looked toward the horizon. "Storm's coming," he said, already moving toward the fields. Rachel, who'd been reading on the porch, looked up. "Need help?" she asked on impulse. He looked skeptical but nodded. "Grab the tarps." Rachel didn't know what tarps looked like or where they were, but Lily pointed her to the barn. Within minutes, wind whipped through the fields and rain began to fall in sheets. Rachel's silk blouse clung to her skin. Her red heels slipped in the mud, but she didn't stop. Together they covered crates, pulled down drying lines, and fought the storm. By the time they got back inside, both were soaked and shivering. Rachel was caked in mud, mascara running, blouse ruined, but she was grinning. So was Noah. "You actually helped," he said, surprised. "Don't sound so shacked," Rachel replied, breathless. They stood there, panting, dripping water onto the wooden floor. For a long second they just looked at each other. Something unspoken passed between them, not quite love, not yet, but something warm, something real. The next day, still buzzing from the adrenaline of the storm, Rachel decided to explore the woods behind the farmhouse. Lily had mentioned a small stream and wildflowers, and after the muddy chaos of yesterday, Rachel was craving a little peace. She traded her heels for borrowed boots, 2 sizes too big, and followed the path into the trees. The forest was beautiful in a way she'd never appreciated before. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the only sounds were chirping birds and her own footsteps. She snapped photos with her phone, already picturing how her social media followers would react. But just as she stepped onto a slope near the stream, her foot twisted on a loose rock. Pain shot up her leg as she tumbled awkwardly to the ground. She tried to stand, but her ankle gave out. Panic set in. Noah found her an hour later, guided by Lily's worry when Rachel didn't return. Without a word, he knelt beside her and checked her ankle. Then he scooped her up like she weighed nothing, his arms firm but gentle. Rachel clung to him, her pride bruised more than her leg. Back at the farmhouse, as Lily wrapped her foot in ice, Rachel realized something startling. She didn't want to leave. Rachel was confined to the farmhouse for a few days, her ankle elevated and mobility limited. At first she hated it. The boredom, the dependency. But surprisingly, it became a time of connection. Noah brought her meals without being asked, and in the quiet moments they began to talk. Late one evening, the power flickered out during a thunderstorm. They lit candles and sat on the couch, a blanket draped over Rachel's legs. The farmhouse felt timeless in the candlelight, like a world far removed from her old life. Noah spoke about the farm, how it had belonged to his grandfather, how he'd nearly lost it during a drought, and how every crop now felt like a battle won. Rachel, in turn, opened up about her father. Charles Lawson, CEO of a global conglomerate, had always expected perfection. Anything less was a disappointment. Her childhood had been golden in appearance, but cold in reality. As they talked, Rachel noticed how Noah listened, really listened, without judgment or trying to fix her. She realized she hadn't had that in years. Maybe ever. That night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Rachel felt something shift inside her. She no longer felt like a stranger in the house. She felt safe. Rachel had never cooked anything more complex than a frozen meal, but one morning, she found herself watching Lily knead dough in the kitchen. The smell was intoxicating, yeasty, warm, comforting. "Want to try?" Lily asked with a grin. Rachel hesitated, then rolled up her sleeves. It was messier than she expected. Dough stuck to her fingers, flour goated her shirt, and she accidentally knocked over a bowl. But Lily laughed, and soon Rachel was laughing too. There was something grounding about using her hands, about creating something from scratch instead of ordering it online. They baked 2 loaves that day. The first was a disaster, dense and nearly raw in the center, but the second was golden and fragrant. Rachel couldn't stop smiling when they pulled it from the oven. She carried a slice out to Noah, who took a bite and nodded approvingly. "Not bad for a city girl," he teased. Rachel beamed. The small success meant more to her than she expected. It wasn't about the bread. It was about being part of something, learning something new, creating instead of consuming. The red heels stayed by the door, untouched. Rachel hadn't realized it yet, but she was beginning to change. When Noah mentioned the town's annual fundraiser, Rachel didn't think much of it. But Lily insisted she come, even loaned her a soft floral dress and helped curl her hair. Rachel stared at herself in the mirror before they left. No makeup, bare feet in sandals, simple dress. She looked unfamiliar. She looked lighter. The town hall was decorated with string lights and wildflowers. Families danced, old friends hugged, and tables were filled with homemade pies and casseroles. Rachel felt awkward at first, like an alien in a foreign land, but then Noah offered his hand. "Dance?" She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. They swayed slowly at first, then found a rhythm. Rachel laughed more in that one evening than she had in years. The townspeople accepted her without question. A woman complimented her pie, Lily's, but Rachel didn't correct her. A little girl asked if she lived on Noah's farm now. Rachel paused, unsure how to answer. When the music slowed and the lights twinkled above them, Noah held her close, his hand on the small of her back. "You fit in better than you think," he murmured. Rachel looked up at him and realized he was right. The next morning, Rachel's phone finally buzzed to life. A missed call from Dad. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't spoken to Charles Lawson in over 2 weeks, a personal record. Her finger hovered over the callback button. She pressed it. He answered immediately. "Rachel, where are you?" She hesitated. "Still out here in the country." His voice tightened. "I'm flying in. I'll pick you up tomorrow." Before she could protest, he'd hung up. Rachel sat in the kitchen, the warmth of yesterday's joy evaporating. She told Noah and Lily over breakfast. Noah didn't say much, but she noticed the way he set his jaw, the shift in his eyes. Lily touched Rachel's hand gently. "You okay with that?" Rachel didn't know. That day she wandered the farm aimlessly. Everything felt fragile now, like the bubble was about to pop. She looked out at the fields, at the chicken coop, at the spot where Noah had carried her. It already felt like home, but what would her father think? That night she lay awake in the attic room, watching the moon through the window. She had come here by accident, but tomorrow she'd have to choose whether she stayed by choice. Charles Lawson's black SUV kicked up a cloud of dust as it pulled into the Carter farm the next afternoon. Rachel stood on the porch in jeans and a borrowed flannel shirt, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't seen her father in months, and now he looked out of place in his tailored suit, stepping into the gravel with a grimace like the dirt might stain his shoes. He barely glanced at the farmhouse before locking his eyes on Rachel. "We're leaving. I've booked us a suite in the city. A car will be waiting." Behind her, Noah stood silently on the steps, his arms crossed but expression unreadable. Charles followed her gaze and raised an eyebrow. "You've been staying with him?" Rachel's face hardened. "Yes, and I'm not ready to leave." Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. "Rachel, be serious. This isn't your world. You're meant for more than chickens and tractors." But Rachel didn't move. She had expected to feel embarrassed, but instead she felt a quiet defiance bubbling inside. The farm might not be her origin, but it had become part of her. Charles looked between her and Noah and shook his head. "You're making a mistake." That evening dinner was tense. Charles had agreed to stay one night, clearly to give Rachel time to come to her senses. But he couldn't help himself from making passive-aggressive comments. "This is your big rebellion, then? Living like a pioneer?" He sneered over his glass of water. "Washing clothes by hand, baking your own bread?" Rachel's fork hovered above her plate. "It's not rebellion, it's peace," Charles scoffed. "Peace? What you call peace, I call mediocrity." Noah sat silently, but his jaw clenched. Rachel slammed her fork down. "You've always thought money made you better. But you're miserable, Dad. And for the first time in my life I'm not." The words stunned even her. She hadn't planned to say them. Charles looked genuinely taken aback. "You're throwing everything away for this." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what I want." Silence fell across the table. Then, with a bitter smile, Charles stood. "Then I won't stop you, but don't come running when it falls apart." He left the next morning without saying goodbye. Rachel watched his SUV vanish into the distance. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. For the first time in her life, she had stood up to him, and she didn't regret it. Rachel couldn't sleep after her father left. His words haunted her in quiet moments. "You're making a mistake." Was she? She packed her things the next morning, unsure what else to do. The tension from the confrontation still lingered, and though Noah hadn't said much, Rachel sensed a wall between them now. Maybe she needed space, maybe they both did. She didn't ask Noah to stop her, and he didn't offer. He carried her suitcase to the truck and nodded. "You know where to find us." The ride to the bus station was quiet. Rachel stared out the window, the landscape flying past, fields she had helped water, the barn she had painted with Noah, the porch where they drank coffee at sunrise. Everything felt like a goodbye, and yet she hadn't decided what she was saying goodbye to. At the station, she looked at Noah. "Thank you for everything." He gave her a small smile, but his eyes were distant. "Take care, Rachel." The bus pulled away, and Rachel pressed her forehead to the glass, blinking back tears. The red heels sat in her bag untouched. For the first time, they didn't feel like part of her anymore. She was leaving something behind, and it hurt. Rachel returned to her high-rise apartment in the city and was immediately struck by the emptiness. Everything was clean, pristine, and cold. Marble floors, silent air conditioning, and a closet full of designer clothes, but no warmth. She unpacked her bag slowly, placing the red heels back in their spot. They looked more like artifacts now than fashion statements. She tried to resume her old life, made dinner reservations, met with friends, visited her favorite spa. But everything felt dull, like watching a movie she no longer cared about. Her friends were more interested in gossip and luxury getaways than stories of planting tomatoes or baking bread. When she mentioned Noah, one of them asked, "Was he like, hot in a rugged way?" Rachel smiled politely but changed the subject. At night she found herself scrolling through photos from the farm, the chickens, the field at sunset, Lily laughing in the kitchen, and Noah's quiet smile. She stood on her balcony, looking down at the glowing city, and felt a deep ache in her chest. For all the comforts around her, something vital was missing. She had left the farm, but it hadn't left her. She closed her eyes and knew she had to go back. Rachel didn't tell anyone she was leaving. She didn't need permission. She packed lightly, jeans, boots, a few t-shirts. The heels stayed behind this time. Her apartment felt less like home and more like a hotel now. Before she left, she wrote a note for her housekeeper and canceled her remaining appointments. At the bus station, she bought a one-way ticket. She smiled as the clerk handed it over, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on her chest lifted. The ride back felt different. She wasn't anxious, uncertain, or afraid. She was hopeful. Each mile closer to the farm made her pulse race, not with nerves but excitement. When she got off the bus, she walked the final stretch, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. The farmhouse came into view just as the sun began to set. It looked just the same, and yet to her it looked like coming home. Noah was feeding chickens when he saw her. He froze, bucket in hand. Rachel waved sheepishly. "Hey," she said. "Miss me?" For a long second he said nothing. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that starts in the eyes and says everything without a word. And Rachel exhaled. She was finally where she belonged. The next few days unfolded gently, as though the land itself had been waiting for her return. Rachel settled back in naturally. There were no dramatic declarations, no big speeches, just quiet understanding between her and Noah. They fell into a rhythm: morning chores, afternoon walks, dinner with Lily. Rachel's ankle had healed, but her heart was still in recovery. Yet every shared glance, every casual brush of hands, stitched something back together. One evening, Rachel found her red heels tucked into a corner of the barn. She held them in her hands for a long time, remembering who she had been when she wore them. Then she hung them on a nail in the barn wall, like a trophy of a life she'd outgrown. That night, she and Noah sat on the porch watching the fireflies. The stars were so clear, so unfiltered. Rachel sipped her tea and leaned into his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find peace in a place with no Wi-Fi," she said with a smirk. Noah chuckled. "You're full of surprises." She smiled, her hand finding his. She didn't need fast cars, fancy apartments, or champagne anymore. She had found something better: quiet joy, purpose, and someone to share it with. Rachel knew she had to say something to Noah. Not just a casual "I'm back," but a true acknowledgement of what had happened and what it had meant. One crisp morning she found him in the barn repairing a broken gate. She stood quietly, watching his practiced hands move with calm purpose. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Noah," she began, "I want to apologize for leaving the way I did, for not saying more." He didn't stop working, but he nodded slightly. "You had to figure things out." "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought I had to choose between two worlds, and I didn't realize I'd already made my choice." Now he turned to her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You came back. That says enough." It wasn't a romantic declaration, but Rachel felt the depth in his words. She stepped closer, reached for his hand. "I don't want to leave again." He looked into her eyes, searching. "Then don't." They stood in silence, the kind that comes not from absence but from understanding. No grand gestures, no sweeping music, just two people who had been tested by distance and had found their way back to each other, and that was more than enough. Spring arrived like a promise. Rachel and Noah threw themselves into preparing the farm for the new season. There was always work to be done: fixing fences, planting rows of vegetables, mending machinery. But now they did it side by side. Rachel had learned to love the soil under her fingernails, the ache in her arms after a day's labor, the joy of seeing sprouts break through the earth. There was something deeply fulfilling about it. This wasn't just a hobby anymore. This was her life. One afternoon, she surprised Noah by painting a mural on the side of the barn: flowers, vines, and a sunrise cresting over green hills. She hadn't painted in years, but something about the land unlocked her creativity again. Noah smiled when he saw it. "You've made it yours." "I think it was always mine," she said, brushing her hair back with a paint-streaked hand. They celebrated small victories: a new calf born, the first ripe tomatoes, a rainstorm that came just in time, and through it all their bond deepened. They didn't talk much about the future, but it was there, humming quietly between them, a shared dream, a life not built from wealth but from work, respect, and love. The day Rachel and Noah decided to marry wasn't marked by a diamond ring or a big proposal. It came in a quiet conversation on the porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose. "I was thinking," Noah said, "maybe we should make it official." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You proposing?" "I guess I am," he said with a chuckle. "Farm style." She leaned in, kissed his cheek. "Then I accept. Farm style." The wedding took place under the great oak tree near the field. They invited the whole town. There were no limousines or crystal chandeliers, just folding chairs, wildflowers, and homemade pies. Rachel wore a white sundress and went barefoot, the grass cool beneath her feet. Noah wore suspenders and a smile that wouldn't quit. Lily made the bouquet, and the local pastor performed the ceremony. As Rachel and Noah said their vows, tears streamed down Lily's cheeks. Even old Mr. Granger, who rarely smiled, clapped with joy. When they kissed, The town erupted into cheers. It wasn't the wedding Rachel had once imagined, it was better. It was real. It was rooted in love, simplicity, and shared purpose. It wasn't the start of a perfect life. It was the continuation of a meaningful one. Years passed, marked by the rhythm of the seasons and the laughter of children. Rachel and Noah's farm thrived, not because of investments or technology, but because of care, love, time. On one golden summer afternoon, Rachel sat on the front porch rocking gently, a toddler balanced on her lap. The red heels, the same ones from that day on the roadside, now sat beside the door like relics. She hadn't worn them since, but she couldn't throw them away. They reminded her of the woman she once was, and how far she had come. Inside, Noah was cooking dinner, humming off-key. Their older son was chasing chickens in the yard, giggling wildly. The sun dipped low, bathing the fields in amber light. Rachel smiled softly. She had lived the high life, skyscrapers, champagne, the cold glitter of city ambition. But nothing compared to this. Not the red carpet, not the rooftop parties, not the praise of strangers. This porch, this land, this family, they were her everything. She leaned down, kissed her toddler's forehead, and whispered, "Mama made the right choice," and she had. The red heels would stay right where they were, a reminder of a road that once ended, and a life that truly began. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about finding love in unexpected places and choosing meaning over materialism.